Okay, let's unpack this. We've got some pretty interesting transfer news coming through.
Yeah, definitely. Looks like Arsenal are making moves.
Right, and it's maybe not quite the move everyone was expecting first. The big talk has been about a striker, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. That's been the narrative. But this source, it's pointing towards a midfielder, someone from Real Sociedad.
And not just any interest. Apparently, they're ready to trigger a pretty hefty release clause.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we need to figure out, what are the facts here from the source and what does this potential signing actually signal about Arsenal's plans?
It's fascinating straight away, that contrast. Striker priority versus a big midfield signing.
And the name, according to the source, is Martin Zubimendi from Real Sociedad. It sounds like Arsenal are moving, well, quite decisively.
Decisively how? Like, what stage are we talking?
The source states they've either triggered or are definitely prepared to meet his release clause, and that figure is £51 million.
Wow, 51 million. That's serious money. And a release clause is different, isn't it? It's not like making a lowball offer.
Absolutely not. For anyone listening who isn't totally sure, hitting the release clause is basically saying, we pay this price, we get to talk to your player. The selling club, Real Sociedad in this case, they have to let Arsenal negotiate personal terms if that 51 meters is met.
So it bypasses all that back and forth haggling over the fee.
Huh.
Shows real intent.
Precisely. Big signal. But the source is clear. It's not a done deal just yet. Meeting the clause is one thing, a massive step, obviously.
But there's still hurdles.
Yeah, the usual ones. They still need to agree personal terms with Zubimendi himself, wages, contract length, all that. And then crucially, he needs to pass the medical.
Right, the medical. Always the final check. So progress, but not quite over the line.
Definitely progress, but yeah, those final steps are key.
Okay, so back to that striker question.
Yeah.
The source does acknowledge that, right? That getting a forward is a major goal for Arsenal this window.
It does, yes. It confirms a striker is seen as a, quote, big priority. Which makes you ask, well, why spend £51 million on a midfielder right now?
Exactly. What's the thinking there, according to the source?
Well, context is everything here. The source clarifies that while the striker is a priority, getting a central midfielder has also always been high on the agenda. It wasn't an either, perhaps.
Okay, so maybe a parallel need.
Seems like it. And the timing makes a lot more sense when you factor in something else the source mentions. Jorginho.
Ah, yes. He's confirmed he's leaving next month, right?
Yeah.
Contract expiring.
Exactly. So, boom, there's a definite gap opening up in midfield. A need for reinforcement becomes immediate because someone is confirmed to be walking out the door.
So less of a surprise move, more of a direct replacement strategy, potentially getting sorted early.
That seems to be the logic presented, yes. It addresses an immediate confirmed need created by Jorginho's departure.
Makes sense. And there's a bit of history with Zubimendi, too, isn't there? The source touches on that.
It does, yeah. Quite interestingly, apparently he was really close to joining Liverpool last summer.
Liverpool. Okay. What happened there?
He reportedly had a change of heart. But the backstory suggests Arsenal had already shown interest around then. The issue for Arsenal at that time, according to the source, was they just had too many midfielders already. No room, basically.
So Arsenal were keen before, but the timing wasn't right until now.
That's what it implies. And apparently, once Arsenal firmed up their interest again more recently, Zubimendi was happy to wait it out at Real Sociedad for another season.
Waiting specifically for Arsenal. Even with Liverpool sniffing around previously.
Seems so. Which, it says something about the player's preference. He was content to wait for this chance at the Emirates. That's a pretty significant factor in any transfer.
Definitely. Player preference can be huge. Okay, so let's try and pull this together. We looked at the source. Arsenal are reportedly very close on Martin Zubimendi, ready to meet that £51 million clause.
Yep, with the final contract details and the medical still to come.
And this midfield move, while maybe surprising given the striker talk, seems directly linked to Jorginho leaving next month. It fills an immediate gap.
And we've got that interesting background, the near miss with Liverpool, and his apparent willingness to wait for Arsenal this time around.
So for you listening, it really underlines how these transfers work, doesn't it? It's not just Team A needs player B.
Not at all. It's timing. It's about who's leaving. It's about whether the player actually wants to come. And crucially, being ready to pay the asking price, or in this case, the release clause. Lots of moving parts.
And this is where it gets really juicy thinking ahead. What does paying £51 million for Zubimendi, when everyone knows you also need a striker, tell us?
Does it show serious financial muscle that they can afford both a top midfielder and a top striker? Or Does this big outlay here potentially mean they have to be a bit more constrained on the striker budget?
Yeah, exactly. And what about the signal it sends? A player seemingly holding out for Arsenal after interest from a club like Liverpool. What does that say about Arsenal's current pull in the market? This one move, it could have ripples, couldn't it? Affecting other targets, maybe even players already in the squad. Lots to think about.